Hi everyone, so here we are for week 5, lesson 5 of the 8-week mindfulness meditation course. I'm here in the greenhouse. A little frustratingly, you can't actually see all the ripe tomatoes and also lots of unripe tomatoes that are around me, but it's a nice space in which to sit and take you through some more principles and some more meditations. As ever, let's start straight away with a short practice. Let's do a 3-minute breathing space where we think about our back, straight back if we can, open airway, as we think about the fact that we will take that big alerting breath. If you remember, I start my meditation practices with an alerting breath, which then moves into my arrival breaths that take the place of the Buddhist bells. So let's take that deep alerting breath in, out, and the arrival breaths. 1, 2, 3. As we move into the 3-minute breathing space itself with the invitation to consider posture, remember to breathe. It's fundamentally a breathing exercise as we think about a posture that is dignified. Dignified posture, helping us to transition to step 1. As we breathe, we try and tune in to sensations of the body. Any sensations anywhere in our body, from top to toe, everywhere and anywhere in between, just tuning in as we breathe. And not worrying if we can't determine particular sensations, just trying to tune in, trying to notice is always sufficient as we transition to step 2. And here we really focus and tune in on our breathing. Each breath in and out becomes a conscious thing that we really consider, we really try and tune into it, unpack it. Where's it coming from? Where's it going to? Through the nostrils, back of the nasal cavity, down the airway, expanding into the lungs, enriching our lungs and our blood, expelling toxins on the way out. Just really tuning into our breath as we transition to step 3. And this sense of the whole body now. Not the individual parts of our body, but the whole body, the space it occupies. Perhaps a sense of its weight, its presence. Feeling perhaps of our skin all around our body, enveloping our body, our whole body. Perhaps as we breathe, even linking this whole body awareness with our breath, breathing with our whole body. As we transition into those exit breaths, 1, 2, free. As we open our eyes, and as always I invite you at this stage in the practice to continue to breathe and just perhaps take in the immediate environment around you, what you're seeing, what you're noticing as you adjust back into the real world. But remember that you have the next 25 minutes to be in meditation world, so continue to breathe. As we, again, and I really hope this isn't proving boring, but a recap, why are we doing this? What's the benefit of mindful meditation? What's the benefit of these short practices? What, if anything, do they do? This idea of a more considered, self-aware, skillful response to challenge, stress, strains in our lives, upset, disappointment, whilst recognizing that we will fail. I have failed this morning. I've had an upsetting morning, but I will continue to try, pulling away from autopilot, snapping out of doing mode, being more present, being more available for the people that matter. And again, I had cause to really push myself on that this morning, and I've been reflecting on that all morning actually. And breaking this cycle of overthinking and rumination. Doing this practice because if you do it regularly, it does appear, and the evidence seems to back this up quite conclusively, it does seem to break this cycle of over-analysis, rumination, which correlates very strongly, very clearly with negative mental health outcomes, particularly around depression. But also, of course, its twin, which is anxiety. As we take from that the idea that mindfulness is not an event, we don't suddenly become mindful and hugely skillful and become superhumans. We continue to use mindfulness to try and help us through our ongoing travails in life, in the hope, and broadly this works, in the hope that we do things a bit more skillfully. And if we think about what mindfulness means, we've thought about Larry Rosenberg's mirror, the idea that when we meditate, we are trying just to hold up a mirror. John Kabat-Zinn's definition of the awareness that arises by paying attention on purpose in the moment and non-judgmentally to things as they are, which feeds into the so-called axioms of mindfulness, which we, I think, introduced last week: intention, attitude, awareness, which you will have noticed I'm building into each of my guided practices now, because certainly I find them powerfully orientating, powerfully settling, powerfully inviting. This construct of IAA helps me to, if you like, arrive into my practice perhaps more powerfully than without it, frankly. So as we think about our core practice today, our 15-minute practice, bear in mind that I will be continuing this theory around intention, attitude, and awareness as we do the practice. But fundamentally, I invite you to sit, to breathe, and just to try and be in contact with your body, your mind, and your breath. That's what it's about as we think about our posture, straight back if we can, opening up that airway as we take that deep, alerting breath that calls a time out in our body and mind as we breathe in, out, the arrival breaths in, out, in, out, in, out. As we think about our posture, and this idea that a posture, our posture, this posture can be dignified. This is a word that's used frequently in mindful meditation, a dignified posture. And the idea that a dignified posture can link to an intention to sit for these next 15 minutes. An intention to try, even if we don't succeed all the time, to try and come to contact and be present with. As we breathe, do remember to breathe. As we try and be with our bodily sensations, our emotions, and our thoughts, through the vehicle really of the breath, the thing that binds it all together. This idea as well that a dignified posture can support a conscious attitude that speaks perhaps of self-confidence, that this next 10 to 15 minutes is a valid use of our time. That it is far from self-indulgent, it's far from touchy-feely, it's actually quite hard-edged, because we know that there is empirical evidence going back hundreds, indeed 2,500 years in the Eastern tradition, that this kind of mindful meditation can help us to achieve a better sense of mental equilibrium as we continue to breathe. But also those of us that are perhaps more cynical should be aware and have confidence in the academic literature, the scientific studies that have emerged in the last 20 to 30 years, which point to concrete mental health and behavioral benefits to mindful meditation practices. And this idea that we have an attitude that says, yeah, so on that basis this is a valid thing for me to do, because actually I'm looking after myself, because I know that I have responsibilities to others. And how can I fulfill those responsibilities to others if I am myself out of balance? But there are attitudinal foundations in mindfulness which are less about self-confidence and more about gentleness, acceptance, non-judgmentalism, attitudes that say, well, Larry Rosenberg says that mindfulness is putting up the mirror. So we continue to breathe and simply looking at the reflection of what is rather than what should be. Mindfulness is about the reality of what is in our body and our mind. And whatever it is valid. And I invite you to accept that and not to introduce judgment into your meditation, just awareness, which of course is the third axiom of mindfulness. The idea that what we try and bring into this practice as well, and again this is supported by our posture, an alert posture, a dignified alert posture. We're bringing an alertness that makes us better able to be aware. As we continue to breathe, better able to be aware and to notice the sensations in our body, the feelings of our emotions, and the thoughts that we constantly have running through our heads. Inviting you to be aware of all of those for the next few minutes as we really try and tune in to bodily sensations. And as we breathe, perhaps starting at the toes, beginning to get a sense of the physical feelings around our toes, soles of our feet, the arches of our feet, the sensations that our shoes, boots create around our feet. Perhaps any tingliness, any tightness, as we bring that awareness, tuning into our calf muscles, our shins, travelling up into our knees. Any sensations arising in that complex joint, our knees. As we travel through our thigh muscles, feeding into our buttock muscles, and perhaps inevitably a certain sense of tightness, because of course our buttock muscles are trying to hold our backs at right angles to our thighs, and that takes a bit of effort. As we consider our pelvis, our lower back, often the cradle for feelings of tightness and tension. Any feelings at all, just noticing them as we go up the back, up the sides of our back, up into our shoulder blades perhaps. Feeling any muscular tightness. It's quite common to feel a muscular tightness as we do this. Sensations, feelings as we consider our chests. Often a hubbub of bodily sensations in here. We've got our heart obviously beating at whatever rate it's beating, and our lungs pushing our rib cage up and down, expanding, contracting. As we consider our shoulder muscles, our arms, forearms, hands, fingers, any tingliness again. As we come back up those arms, up into those shoulders, and into the neck. And as soon as I use that word, neck, I almost feel obligated to turn my neck, loosen my neck. And as I do that, I can feel tightness being released. Likewise with my shoulders, I just rotate my shoulders, feeling all sorts of bodily sensations, which of course I'm introducing. And as I stop, I'm now trying to tune into the sensations that are left, the sensations that remain. As I consider my jaw, There's been quite a lot of jaw clenching this morning, and I think I can feel that in my jaw, so I'll perhaps just loosen it. Remembering all the while to breathe as deeply as feels appropriate for this bit of the practice. And travelling up finally perhaps into our head, our temples. Any tensions, any tightnesses in there as we think now about our breath, of course, our breath. As we think now about each and every breath, really being curious about these breaths as they come in and out, inviting you to focus on your breath in silence for a few moments. Those invitations from the body scan, the 3MBS I should say, around where's this breath coming from, where is it going, what's it doing. But also acknowledging that it might not be enough to hold our attention, that our mind may wander to thoughts and to-dos and lists, commitments, obligations, deadlines. And if that happens, inviting your mind to come back to the breath, this breath. Studying that breath. Really connecting with that breath. And however many times our minds wander in mindful meditation practice, remember those non-judging aspects of the attitudes of mindfulness, the sense of acceptance, the permission to accept that mind wandering will happen. But that if we notice it, we come back to the breath, this breath. As I think now about inviting us to transition out of this practice with our exit breaths, the first one coming up now, breathing in, out, in, out, in, out. We open our eyes, tuning into the room around us, space around us, but perhaps just holding on to the bodily sensations, the feelings, the sense of how that practice went, how it made us feel. Just holding on to that for a moment as we continue to breathe. And thinking about again, why is it that we're doing this, if you like, the motivational piece around mindful meditation practice, because as I've said before, I was not just something of a cynic, I would say I was a deep cynic about meditation. I really didn't think much of it as I started to do it. I abandoned it when I was being encouraged to use it as a mechanism, an activity to coax me out of depression, I just couldn't handle it. I just couldn't do it. And as I was invited to do it for my 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction course, which was a necessary prerequisite for my master's program at Bangor, and then suddenly at Bangor I had to do this stuff because this meditation piece underpins so much of mindfulness practice and teaching, and so I had to really come through a journey where I began to try and understand what it is that I'm doing. And I came to understand that actually, as well as the psychological literature, there has in the last 10 to 15 years been a lot of neuroscientific literature. So neuroscientists have got involved in this area, and they've used ECGs to measure electrical impulses, not ECGs, EEGs, to measure impulses in our brains, signals in our brains, functional MRI to capture patterns in our brains, images in our brains, and really begun to poke around in terms of what's going on in our heads, in our brains, and when we meditate. And it turns out there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going on, and this is opening up all sorts of really interesting evidence and lines of inquiry, research around not just the benefits that mindful meditation can have on stress reduction and depression prevention, reductions in anxiety, but also things around wider emotion regulation and attention control. So, and this in a sense is why I'm nudging us each week to just lengthen the meditation that we're doing, because the evidence is suggesting that the more we practice, the longer we practice, the more we gain skills around attention control, this ability to reduce the amount of mind wandering, rumination, overthinking that we do, and increasing the amount of time that we spend just being in the moment, focusing on the here and now, with all of the benefits that brings. Attention control is another way of saying concentration. So mindful meditation practice can improve our concentration, not just when we're meditating, but in life, in work. So as we think about ending this lesson, let's end it with another short practice, and in view of the time, but also to emphasize that short practice is absolutely fine, let's end on a 90-second breathing exercise. So again, posture, straight back, open airway, alerting breath, deep breath, in, out. Arrival breaths, 1, 2, 3. As I invite you to breathe in silence for a minute. As we now transition out of this practice through our exit breaths, 1, 2, 3. As we open our eyes and take in the space around us. So we continue to breathe and consider the homework, which I will perhaps link to a summary of today's session. So the homework is going to be to continue to do 3 practices a day if we can. One of them perhaps being 3 MBS, the idea that a short formal practice done on a daily basis can really encapsulate so many lessons and principles of mindfulness. So even short practice can work. But perhaps introducing a longer practice, seeing if we can do 15 minutes. Because longer practices are about consolidating, lengthening, increasing the amount of time that we are practicing these core skills of mindfulness, with the benefits that they have in terms of our capacity to regulate our stress, our capacity to regulate our relationship with certain situations that give rise to stress, difficult situations, stressful situations, challenge, pressure, upset, emotion. The idea that longer practice can just help us deal with those better. And also the emerging, but very strong already evidence in the neuroscientific literature. So it's not just the psychologists and, if you like, Eastern mystics that are saying that mindfulness helps, but actually the neuroscientific research, measuring our brains in scientific conditions using hospital, university grade equipment, is pointing to concrete gains, concrete outcomes if we introduce this into our routines, into our daily routines. So 3 practices a day, short, longer, mix it about, and see what you can do. As I wish you Godspeed with your practice, and I will see you next week.